You are listening to The Underground Subway with host David Alston, a podcast dedicated to giving you the strategies to live a free and better life. Here is David Alston.
Hi, I'm David Alston, host of The Underground Subway. Thank you for joining this podcast that is dedicated to giving you the strategies, the tools necessary to make life better. The Underground Subway. We are not the Underground Railroad. We are the Underground Subway. We're modernized. What do I mean by modernized? Harriet Tubman, years ago, she led the Underground Railroad, and she led so many people from bondage to liberty. We're doing the same thing during this modern era, except we're doing it in a more modern way. And we're not leading people from bondage to slavery in the traditional way, but we are leading people to freedom by way of giving them the strategies necessary so that they can be free, so that we all can be free. And I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Whatever, wherever you're listening, you may be listening in your car, you may be listening at work on your headphones, wherever you're doing. I want to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to listen to the Underground Subway. Listen, my friends, I have a special guest, and we're going to come at you hard and heavy with some great strategies on how you can make yourself better by working your passion. This podcast is a passion of mine. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy running my mouth. I enjoy talking, but I also enjoy talking in a manner that helps people to be liberated in order to live a life free of restraints. Well, my guests on this version of the podcast, we're going to really have a good time. And I'm super excited, as you can hear, about having Tyler Foley as my guest. Let me tell you a little bit about Tyler Foley. He is an accomplished film and stage performer, and he has been acting in film and television since the age of 6 years old after his father passed away suddenly in a motor vehicle accident. He has appeared in productions including Freddy Vs Jason, Door to Door, Carrie, and the musical Ragtime. Tyler is very passionate about helping others confidently take the stage and impact an audience with their stories. He is currently the managing director of Total Buy-In, and author of the #1 best-selling book, The Power to Speak Naked. I want to hear about that. Tyler is a father, husband, son, and performer in that order. Some days he feels like he's dabbled in every industry on the planet, from oil and gas to aviation to film and television. But that diverse experience is what has made him so versatile. Today, Tyler works with executives and CEOs, helping them show up powerfully behind the mic to gain the exposure they need. Tyler is also a veteran podcast guest with over 300 experience appearances on episodes with topics ranging from leadership, safety, to overcoming adversity. With his distinct and direct style, Tyler is emerging as one of North America's most sought after leaders in the field of public speaking for personal and professional development, and would welcome the opportunity to be on your show and discuss the lessons he has learned and the grace he has discovered in each event in his life. With that being said, we want to talk about the things that he's gone through and how he can help us to become better at expressing ourselves. I want to welcome to the Underground Subway the one and the only Tyler Foley. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us on the Underground Subway.
Oh, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, David. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. That was such a long bio. We took up all the time introducing you, but we'll get it.
And we'll see you next episode.
Yeah, there you go. My friend, thank you for joining us. Let's get right into it. Part of your introduction, we talked about the things that you had gone through. And before we get into how to apply that into being a public speaker, or someone may be listening that want to start their own podcast or video cast or what have you, tell us some of the things you've gone through that have molded and shaped you in your career.
Oh, there's so many things that have happened. You'd alluded to my father's passing, and that obviously had a fairly profound impact on me and my development. Just prior to that was my first experience on stage at 6 years old. And between those two events, that kind of set me up on my life path. One event that has solidified everything that I want to do in life, and then one event that has created an awareness of just how precious life is. And so I continue to pursue that thing that brings me joy. Further to that, I know at 17, I had a medical incident that left me paralyzed. The left side of my body completely paralyzed for over a year. Luckily, I was able to recover, but it was quite an arduous journey in doing that. And my first business that I started after graduating university, I unfortunately lost due to the untimely passing of my business partner. So adversity has been around my my life
Mm-hmm.
for various parts of it, but there have always been moments of grace within that too. I mean, the business collapsing the first time set up the success of the business that I currently run. My father's passing showed me just how precious life was and allowed me to really strive towards living the best life that I can. Even in 2015 during the financial collapse up here in Alberta, when oil and gas tanked, I lost our dream house. We couldn't afford it. My wife and I went from multi six-figure income down to less than $50,000 a year in just under a month, and that really showed what was the priorities in life and what was important. It also happened right at
Mm-hmm.
the time that we were expecting our daughter. So, I became a new father and homeless within 2 months of each other, which was both amazing and devastating all at the
I'm
same time. But
sure. I'm
it's
sure.
amazing how quickly you realize what's important there.
I'm sure. I'm listening to you. You have a story, and I have a story. Is it important for for all of us to tap into or find our own life story?
Well, first of all, everybody has a story, and that's, I think, the key thing to understand first. So many people will listen and they say, "I don't have a story. My life is boring." And or insignificant. They try to diminish their own light, which is unfortunate. So we need to understand that um, there is a story in all of us. And the thing about stories is we don't know who needs to hear them until we tell them. It, for you, even being the third cousin of Harriet Tubman, that has a profound impact on everything that you do. And, particularly
Mm-hmm.
with this podcast and what you're trying to accomplish with it. So we need to tap into what our stories are and then share those out with the world, because that's where we find truly our calling and our what is significant in the world.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Okay, give us an example. Your last sentence really says an awful lot. You said we find that story and tap into how we need to share that with the world. Ex- Uh, I love to give this analogy. I know some of my listeners say, "Okay, yeah, we know where you're going." I'm from Philadelphia, and one of my favorite movies is Philadelphia with Denzel Washington and Tom Hanks. And there's a scene in which Denzel Washington, who's an attorney, asks one of the witnesses, "Explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old." Well, I'm
Hmm.
asking you, Tyler, explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old. How do I get my story out?
But honestly, there are thousands of ways to do it. Um, what you and I are doing right now, talking on podcasts, and it's actually remarkably easy to get on podcasts. I was on over 300 podcasts last year, and people are like, "How did you do that? That's like a podcast a day." And I'm like, "Actually, it's two a day, 5 days a week, and then you take a couple of weeks off." But if you wanted to get on, if anybody who's listening right now wanted to get on 100 podcasts, they could do it in less than 100 days, because you do that two podcasts a day, 5 days a week. That typically requires you to slot off anywhere from an hour to 2 hours a day of your time,
Mhm,
easily done in the evening, as you and I are doing right now.
mhm,
And if you were to do that days a week, 2 times a day, that's only 10 weeks. That's 2.5 months to
Hmm.
be on 100 podcasts.
Wow.
And there are other ways too. There's books, there's stages. Any opportunity you have to speak in front of another person is an opportunity to share your story. And again, you don't know who needs to hear it until you say it. So with the abundance of
Mhm.
platforms for you to speak and have your message heard, it's really a disservice to the world if you're not telling your story to the people who need to hear it.
Wow, that's powerful. You're a disservice to the world if you're not telling your story. That's amazing. Tyler, I had the privilege years ago. I had the privilege of speaking on a regular basis to a bunch of teachers at a teachers conference here in North Carolina, and I spoke one year to about 55. It was about 55 people and 55 teachers. And then the next thing I know, the next year that number swelled to 150. Then the next year it swelled to 300, and the next year was up to 700. And before I knew it, I'm standing there one year as the keynote speaker in front of 2,000 people, and I was in my world. I love it because I love to speak to a crowd. I know how to work a crowd. I know how to get them laughing, and right after they're laughing, they're in tears, they're high-fiving. But what about the person that has a story that when they get around people, they experience what we call stage fright, where they're just nervous speaking to two people?
Mm. Well, the first thing to recognize is stage fright is a real thing. But what people attribute to stage fright in this belief that they're afraid of public speaking is a myth. The number of people who identify as having this fear or phobia around public speaking is theoretically around 77% of North Americans. And the reality is, if that were true, commerce as we know it would collapse. So for anybody right now who's thinking, "Oh, but I'm afraid, I'm terrified to speak in front of people. I'm terrified of public speaking." I would ask them to think of the last time they were at a restaurant. And if they ordered food in a restaurant and they didn't know their wait staff, very likely uh, they were not only speaking in public, but they were speaking to a complete stranger and asked for what they want and got it. So, this notion that we are afraid to speak in public, afraid to talk to strangers, or afraid to ask for what we want is completely and totally null and void if you have ever gone to a restaurant, ordered food, and gotten the food that you had requested. The reality is, this stage fright is coming from a fear of public judgment. And
Wow.
the quickest way to overcome that fear of judgment is to recognize that the audience is on your side. If you have been given a platform, as I am on your show right now, or you are on your show on an ongoing basis, people are coming to listen to the content that you're providing. You are the authority. They wouldn't show up if they didn't want to hear what you have to say.
Right.
So the audience is already on your side. You're already winning. And if there was somebody who was better at it than you, we would have asked that person. We don't ask second best. We ask the best. So the audience is on your side and you are the authority if you've been granted a platform, even if that platform is just one or two people. And so I would encourage everybody to take their power back, quit giving it away to this mythical audience that you feel is somehow judging you negatively, because they're not. If we are remarkably selfish creatures as human beings, and if we didn't want to be somewhere or hear a message, we just wouldn't show up. We're not going to
Mhm.
download the podcast. We're not going to show up to the venue. We're not going to even go to the boardroom. If you are giving a presentation at work and you have been voluntold to give last quarter's sales statistics, we'll say, if
Mhm.
even though it's mandatory for people to show up into that boardroom and listen to you talk, theoretically, the reality is we can come up with excuses not to be in that boardroom if we don't want to be there.
That's true.
And when we are
I
there,
hope my
we
boss isn't
want you to,
listening.
yeah,
I hope my boss isn't listening
when
to this
we are there,
podcast.
we want you to succeed, right? Because we don't want to feel that our time was wasted. So we're rooting for you to give us information that is valuable to us. And that is what you need to remember. So if you are experiencing stage fright, take a couple deep breaths, tell yourself, if they didn't want to be here, they wouldn't be. And if
Hmm.
there's somebody better that could have done it, they would have asked them, which makes me the authority. These people are on my side. And now all I have to do is give my best presentation. The other thing, if you want to overcome stage fright and the fear of public judgment, the fastest way to do that is to become incredibly competent at public speaking. And the only way to become confident is through competency. And the only way to become competent is to do something over and over and over and over again. So if you want to have confidence in public speaking, you need to have competence in public speaking. And to have competence in public speaking, you just have to find the opportunities to speak over and over. And like I said,
Wow.
they're abundant. They're everywhere.
Wow. So what about intimidation? Example, I'm doing a podcast, you have a podcast, and I'm intimidated because your podcast numbers are far greater than mine. You have 1,000 followers and I have three. And two of those three is myself and my alias.
Yes, but that one other person is remarkably engaged and listens every time. Here's the thing. There's always going to be somebody who's doing it better than you. Always. There's also somebody who's looking at you, wishing that they could do the thing that you're doing. There's somebody who's like, wow, I can't believe that David had the ability to put on a podcast, period, because they don't even know where to start, right? So
Right.
we can't compare ourselves to anybody else. That is not our role. That is not the way to gain confidence. In fact, it's the way to erode confidence, because we will always find the person who's doing it bigger, better, stronger, faster, smarter, whatever. The reality is it's up to you to show up and do you the best way that you know. I
Hmm.
am never worried about what the number of people who attend any of my events are. I do a weekly training in my Facebook group, and we call it Tuesday Tips. And I come live for 20 minutes every Tuesday at noon Pacific, 3 Eastern. And there are times where we have 50 to 100 people on that call. And there have been times where there have been one. That one person gets a private training with me for 20 minutes because they're engaged and they're there. They want to learn. The audience size doesn't matter, right? Ask any of the ladies. Size doesn't matter. It's how you deliver the material.
Hmm.
And that's the real thing that you have to hold true to your heart. You can't compare the size of your audience. You can't compare the level of achievement that you've gotten telling your story. Understand it's your story and you don't know who needs to hear it. It could be an audience of one. But if you change just one life with that story, is that not rewarding?
That's right.
Should that not be enough?
That's right. That's right. I think sometimes we overlook that and we fail to realize just that one person was worth it. Talk to us, Tyler, about your number one best-selling author, and the title of your book is The Power to Speak Naked. The Power to
Yes, it
Speak
is.
Naked. What is that about?
Well, I mean, there's many, many, many layers to that title. On the surface, I really truly believe that when you have true confidence in your message, that it doesn't matter what you're wearing. And I want to empower people to be able to take a stage, be able to take it in the emperor's new clothes, and be so captivating, so compelling, and so committed to their story and their craft and to their audience that the audience wouldn't even notice what you were wearing because your words kept them completely and totally engaged, that they had no time to think of anything else. That is truly my mission in life, is to give people that kind of confidence in taking the stage. And do I encourage nude public speaking? No. No, I do not. But I want you to feel that it wouldn't matter, that you could do it anyway and have such unshakable bravery in delivering your message that it wouldn't matter what you were wearing. To that, the power to speak naked also alludes to the fact that you don't need a fancy suit. You don't need a PowerPoint. You don't need props. You don't need an AV system. You don't need anything but you and an audience to deliver a powerful message. And so I want people to be able to strip their presentations down to just a raw, naked presentation where you don't need all that stuff, where you can go back to the days of the great Greek orators and just be able to speak to a crowd and have them listen
Hmm.
and be engaged and compelled by your words. And then at its very root level, if you really want to be that confident with your messaging, if you really want to be able to give a presentation in a raw, naked format, then you have to be compelling. And in order to be compelling, you need to expose your audience to the raw, naked truth. See, we all have a story, but we like to sugarcoat it. We like to give it a PR spin that a lot of times takes away from what the truth is. You know, it's very easy to be honest without telling the truth. And you can tell the truth without being honest. It's when you can marry the two together and be honest and truthful at the same time that you have the most impact with your audience. And a lot of people are afraid to say what that raw, naked truth is. And if you can find the bravery within yourself to share those little bits that you covet, that you're holding close to your chest, that you don't want anyone else to see or hear or know,
Hmm.
those are the people and those are the things that need to be shared, because that's when you can truly have impact, by letting people see the cracks and the flaws so that they can see the true beauty that is you and the true beauty that is your story, so that they can identify better with it and say, that's me. Thank you for being brave enough to say that, because I was scared to myself. And that's how you find your leadership. That's how you find your calling. That's how you find your tribe. That's how you find your people and your audience, is when you find the bravery to speak the raw, naked truth and say the thing you're afraid to say.
That's powerful, Tyler. Very powerful. Question about question about speaking not just to a public audience, but you mentioned a word a second ago, leadership. And I want to discuss for a minute how the two kind of coexist. I remember, as I told you earlier, I mentioned earlier about speaking to thousands of teachers in one setting. About, I think it's about 1,500 teachers in one setting. And what I did was I had the crowd going. I was working the crowd, and I dabbled a little bit in speaking to the teacher with a hard face, stony face that was looking as if, I don't care what you say, I'm only here because I have nothing else to do. As opposed to 90% of the time, I'm speaking to the teacher that is engaged, that's high-fiving, that's telling me, yes, yes, yes. Which one, whether it's public speaking or leadership, which group should we focus the most of our energy to? The one that we're trying to pull out of that stony situation, or that one that's already out pushing us and telling us, yes, I believe in your message?
I don't think it's an either or scenario.
Okay.
I think if you are, because so you're never going to be able to please 100% of the people 100% of the time. So you can't,
Right.
if you're trying to do that, you're already failing.
Right.
But you have no idea how your words could potentially win over that skeptic.
Hmm.
But if all you're doing is focusing on winning over the skeptic, you're losing your believers.
Exactly. Right. I feel you. I feel you.
But it's amazing how, when your believers are testifying for you, how when they become evangelical on your behalf,
Hmm.
how they are able to convert the non-believer to your side.
Right.
And I do that
Exactly.
not by placating to either one of those camps. Again, it roots down to my truth. If I speak the way that I'm going to speak, if I am unabashedly and unashamedly me, two things are going to happen. I'm going to draw the people who need to hear that message like moths to a flame directly to me. I'm also going to repel the people who don't agree with my message away from me like I'm spraying mace. And I'm going to do it all at the same time. And That is okay. I'll give you a perfect example of this. I am going to say 4 words,
Okay.
4 words right now. Everybody who's listening will have an instant reaction to those 4 words. Some of them are going to be like, yes. And some of them are going to be like, ugh. But they're going to have a reaction to it. And they're going to know not only who said those words, and I don't even have to say their name. They're going to know who said those words, and they're going to have an instant reaction to it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Make America great
You
again.
know, I knew when you said those 4 words where you were going. I knew
Everybody
they were the 4
knows.
words.
And that's the thing. I don't even need to use the name of the person who said that. People will have an instant reaction to that. It's either a positive or a negative reaction. It's not in between. There's no
right,
wishy-washy
exactly.
with it either, right? Nobody's going, eh. No, they're either going, yeah, or they're going, ugh. It's 2 camps, distinctly 2 camps. And that's the power of being in your messaging, for good or for evil. It doesn't matter. Right? But if you are true to yourself and you don't deviate regardless of what people, if you don't try to placate both sides, you get your devout followers, and you get the people who are like, I want nothing to do with that message. And although that's an extreme example, that's honestly what I strive for. The people who do not resonate with my message, that's okay, because I probably can't serve them. And even if I could serve them, I don't know that I need to serve them. But the people who resonate with my message, who go, yes, Tyler, preach it. I understand what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I want more of what you're saying. Those are the people who I want to work with. Those are the people who I want to help. Those are the people who I want to see rise with me. And I don't have time for the wishy-washy, and I don't have time for the people who don't understand. Not that I don't want to help everybody on the planet. That'd be great. But I'm one person and there's 7.5 billion people on here. So I got to narrow the field down a little bit.
How important is comedy? Because when I speak, I had a coworker the other day that told me, she said, you know what? You're in the wrong profession. I said, what do you mean? She said, I had the entire office laughing. So you said critical. Explain why.
Because here's the thing. Humor is disarming. And you don't have to be naturally funny to have humor in your presentation. If there's something that you find funny that is applicable to your presentation, you can always post it up as like a meme or, a slide in it. Like, a lot of times when I was first presenting, my background, when I finished acting, because again, I acted for 20 years and then I retired at 25 because I'd been acting since 6.
Okay.
Right.
Well,
so
yeah.
20-year career, I get to do what I do. And I retired and I took all of my mad movie star money and I invested it in my education, and I got an engineering discipline. And engineers are remarkably dull and boring. And yes, that's a stereotype, but I'm embracing that stereotype because I had a pinky ring and I get to say that. And when I would give my presentations, I specialized in safety. And safety is even more boring than just engineering. And so a lot of times, to spice it up, I would find like Dilbert cartoons or Far Side cartoons that were applicable to what I was saying, but present it as just kind of a deviation. Or I'd get a lot of YouTube videos too, and I'd put those into my presentation. I have a natural humor about me, but it doesn't always land or resonate. And I know that at least the cartoons are mostly universally funny. So you stick those in, you get people laughing, you get people feeling relaxed, and they're more likely to listen to what you have to say. I think emotion, it's not just that humor is critical. I think that emotion is critical. If you are this robotic automatron, nobody's going to listen to what you have to say. But if you can make them feel something, especially if you can take them on those highs and lows, you can make them laugh and make them cry. Oh man. And now you've got an audience's attention.
Yeah. Well, how much of that comedy, as well as that the reverse side of the comedy, which is that emotion of the crying, how much does that play into them trusting you to the point where they want to trust to hear what you have to say?
Again, I think it's one of those critical components, but because if you are reaching people on an emotional level, and remember, Mark Twain, I think, said it best: the only difference between comedy and tragedy is time. Um, if you can look back at some of those tragic points in your life and make fun of them or some of your mistakes and find humor or levity within it, um, that's starting to get truthful and honest with yourself, right? Where you can see both sides of the coin and be real and open about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you can have real impactful change. A friend of mine, Jared, does a presentation called the 10-minute time machine, and he's a master storyteller where he makes you laugh and cry. And the 10-minute time machine is about the point in his life where he managed to succeed in his decade-long quest to find the right combination of pills and alcohol to end his life. And he was doing that specifically because he sells life insurance, and he wanted to be able to end his life in a way that would allow his children to receive his full life insurance package as an accidental overdose. And the 10-minute time machine
Wow.
talks about when he got it right. He got it right on the one day after 5 years of having no custody or contact with his children, where his wife had trusted him, and well, his ex-wife had trusted him enough to take care of their kids because she just needed a break. And he put them to bed, and then he'd been in this, literally 10-year cycle of starting this process around 11 o'clock at night. So he'd gone to sleep, woken up, forgotten the kids were there, got into the drugs and alcohol, actually did get it right. And the last thing he remembered just before everything went black and dark was his son saying, "Daddy, are you okay?" And everything in his being and his soul cried out and said, "Not today. It can't be today. This can't be the time that you get it right, Jared. You got to wake up. You got to wake up. You got to wake up." And he managed to mumble to his son, "Help." His son phoned 911. When the ambulance finally did arrive, he was pronounced dead. They managed to resuscitate him, pump his stomach, and he lived. And he talks about the 10-minute time machine, saying, if he could have a time machine that took him back to those 10 minutes, would he change anything? And his answer is always no, because he needed that moment to realize how precious his life actually was, that his children were better off with him in their life than without it, and that he had something to live for, not something to die for. And when he tells this story, I'm totally butchering it because it's not my story to tell, for one. Um, when he tells it, he is so graceful in his presentation, and he makes you laugh. Like, he talks about, only being able to stomach Slurpees and Rice Krispie squares. So that's what he would eat prior to doing all this stuff. And then he would tell everybody, if you, if you're looking to lose 20 pounds, you look emaciated, but it's a great diet. And everybody laughs, right? Like, he finds the humor in that situation, tragic as it was. And you laugh, you cry, but he is so vulnerable with it that you get vulnerable with him. And I will tell you, when I say that you never know who needs to hear your message, I had the joy and the privilege of speaking with Jared at an event called Life by Design in 2017.
Uh,
And he gave this presentation. At that time, there was a woman in the audience by the name of Charlene. And Charlene had been gifted a ticket to this weekend event by a friend. And so, out of politeness, she agreed to come, knowing full well that a Monday morning, this was a weekend event, Monday morning, she had a spot picked out in the mountains over her favorite lookout spot in the lake. She had just purchased a new rifle, and she too was going to find a way to no longer have to exist on this earthly plane.
wow.
She heard Jared's talk, realized that he was right, and that she needed to get some help. And so she reached out Monday morning. Instead of taking the rifle up to the spot overlooking the lake, she gave the rifle to a friend and said, "You need to keep this, and I need help." She drastically transformed her life over the next 12 months, reached out to the event coordinator, and the next year asked if she could speak at this event. I had the privilege and honor that year, instead of being a speaker, to be the MC of the event. And I got to see her give her presentation. When she gave that presentation, 3 people in that audience reached out to her and said, I have the same feelings and I need help. And she was able to guide them towards the resources that she had used a year previous to get that. One person had the bravery to come out and say his truth. That was hard to say, because remember, this is a life insurance salesman who was trying to take his life. He has the bravery to say, this is where I was and this is what I'm doing, and tell his story, and tell it in a powerful and engaging and authentic and honest way that then changed and impacted another person's life. That person then had the bravery and the courage to come and tell her story, and it impacted 3 people's lives. Now, I don't know where that ripple ends, but I know where it begins. And even if it stopped right there, that's 4 people who were saved because one person was brave enough to tell their story. So when I say you have a story to tell and you never know who your audience is or who needs to hear that until you tell it, that is a prime example of what I mean.
Wow. That is powerful. Well, Tyler, we're out of time. That is powerful. I was just so engaged. I wasn't even looking at the time. But that's powerful. Well, I want to thank you for joining us on the Underground Subway. Thank you for taking time out of your, I'm sure, dramatically busy schedule to spend these few minutes with us. And on behalf of the listeners, thank you so much. This was very powerful and motivational, inspirational. And we're going to take our story and we're going to get our message across, and we're going to do better. Maybe in the future, would you mind coming back and talking about some other things with us, if you can squeeze
David,
us in?
it would be my joy and my pleasure. I can always make time for you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And in parting, I need to say this, everyone. I thank you so much for tuning into the Underground Subway. Thank Tyler for joining me. This was just so powerful. I'm speechless, especially at that last story. You know, I was laughing the other day on a situation that was traumatical for me. I grew up in a home without a father. And so we celebrated Father's Day recently, and I told someone I celebrated Where is My Father's Day? And they started laughing, but they didn't know you can take a traumatic experience and find laughter in it. It helps you. Well, thank you, Tyler. Again, I want to thank everyone for listening, for tuning into the Underground Subway. Before you go, I want to challenge you. I want to challenge everyone that's listening. Before you go to bed tonight, I want you to find a mirror and I want you to look yourself in the eye. Just stare yourself eyeball to eyeball. And I want you to ask yourself a question today, did I do something to get my story into the world, to help the world to be a better place? Or did I waste another day? That's something to think about. Think about that, my friends. Have a great today and an even better tomorrow. And I'll see you next time on the Underground Subway.